So, at the fundamental level, we are focused on transforming the way that we understand and treat the brain. So, it's pretty audacious. But where we've started is with depression. And we are looking to fundamentally shift the way that we think about treating mental illness. I think for the last 30 years, drugs have really dominated the landscape. Over 80% of people who are treated for any form of mental illness are given drugs when we know the preference would likely be for something else. And sort of our fundamental belief is not only is there a better way to treat mental illness or the brain, we can do it in a way that's competitive with drugs. So that means we're just as effective, if not more effective, and we're affordable and we can be accessible.
Welcome to the MedTech 101 podcast. And today it's something that's, I think, affects a lot of people, a lot of my friends in particular. So, a lot of people are going to be happy to hear this podcast. And we're basically touching on something that's been like a silent, sort of like a silent killer around the society, which is depression. But what makes this device so cool is that not only does it look like a pair of headsets that helps you like fight off depression, but it's also something that does this without using like antidepressants. And I know people who have told me for a long time that it makes them feel like their heads are up in the clouds. So I'm joined today with the CEO of Flow Neuroscience, Erin Lee. So yeah, welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. So yeah, just to get started, your background leading to Flow Neuroscience. What could you tell the audience about yourself?
Yeah, I would say on paper, if you sort of look at my background or my resume, maybe your first thought is she has no business being in MedTech. I have a very non-traditional background. I went to liberal arts college. I studied political science and Russian. So again, very a long way from neuroscience. And I spent really the first part of my career, really the first 20 years in high growth consumer tech. So I started my career at Google, which I say is a great place to grow up. You learn a lot about being in a big business, sort of the fundamentals. I moved to Uber, which is what brought me overseas. Worked in Northern Europe and the Middle East. It's a wonderful company, sort of exceptional talent. But I didn't really enter healthcare until my last company, which was Babylon Health. And that was really my first foray into the mess that is sort of global healthcare delivery. And I think as part of that, while Babylon was focused on digital primary care, you really see what a big part mental health plays in full person health. And after 4.5 years in Babylon, I was ready for something else. I met the founders at Flow, and sort of the rest is history.
Oh, nice, nice. That's quite an unorthodox way into medtech
Yes,
because
yes.
most people in medtech have either done some sort of like STEM subject, or they've done like basically medtech all the way up. So it's quite exciting to hear that. And I think if anything, it means that your touch and your approach to medtech would be also unique as well. So but I'm quite curious to see how like how you balance everything, your work and everything. Because from what I understand, you work in London, but the company is based, it's a Scandinavian company. So does that also then talk about the operations you guys have, or how do you manage to pull that off?
Yeah. So I sort of say I don't really live anywhere. You're absolutely right. Our Flow was founded in Malmo, Sweden. Our two co-founders are both Swedish, and we have a big, well, not big, but we have a small team focused on largely R&D research, clinical development, some product out of Malmo, and then our business team sits in London. I spend a lot of time in the US. A lot of our investors are there. Obviously, it's a big market. We have a lot of interest, Middle East. And I think, one of the things we learned at Uber is companies are global. You've got to be sort of where your customers are, where the need is. And so we try and build the infrastructure and the processes that enable us to work from many different time zones. I would say we don't always get it right. It's very difficult. I think our benefit is that we are quite small. So there's just 20 of us. So it's kind of hard. I would say if we were running a massive organization, we probably have stronger processes, but somehow we figure it out.
Nice. No, that's really good. And like for the audience listening, like I've known about flow neuroscience for quite some time actually, because or maybe I'm just a huge enthusiast of medical technology, but I mean, like, I don't want to spoil it for them.
Yeah.
Again, I want to give you the chance to shine, Erin. But like, what would you tell people listening, like, what flow neuroscience is about?
Yeah, so at the fundamental level, we are focused on transforming the way that we understand and treat the brain. So it's pretty audacious. But our first, where we've started is with depression. And we are looking to fundamentally shift the way that we think about treating mental illness. I think for the last 30 years, drugs have really dominated the landscape. Over 80% of people who are treated for any form of mental illness are given drugs when we know the preference would likely be for something else. And sort of our fundamental belief is not only is there a better way to treat mental illness or the brain, we can do it in a way that's competitive with drugs. So that means we're just as effective, if not more effective, and we're affordable and we can be accessible.
Nice, nice, and using this kind of sort of like device that looks like a sort of like a pair of headsets
Yes.
essentially. And for those guys listening to this on the audio, I would recommend you to head over to the YouTube version of this episode so that you can see the diagrams, which I'm going to be putting on top of this episode for people to see. um like, when it comes to, okay, so how does it really work? I know it is to do with stimulating the brain, because apparently depression is linked to like reduced brain activity, correct? And so the idea is to try to stimulate the brain. And but how does it work? Do you need to charge it every single day? Do you need to connect it to a power cable? Can you use it in any space, or is it something that you only get in your doctor's office? Like, what could you tell us about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we do the flow sort of solution has three core components, but the most visible is the one that you've mentioned. It's our wearable headset. And that uses electricity to target the root cause of disease. So you wear the headset. It targets the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, quite a mouthful, but that's the area of the brain that's responsible for, mood, focus, memory. And when you look at sort of scans of a depressed brain, what you often see is lower activity in this region. And so what we're doing is we are targeting that area. We're running a mild form of electrical stimulation, so less than a 9-volt battery. And we are sort of gently nudging those neurons back to activity. And so by increasing the activity in that region, we reduce depressive symptoms. You wear the headset for 30 minutes a day. In the initial treatment phase, it's about 5 times a week for 3 weeks, and then 2 to 3 times a week to maintain those results. You wear it at home. You can watch Netflix, cook dinner. Some of our users prefer to wear it in the morning. They get really energized, invigorated. Others prefer to wear it at night. They find it helps them sleep. So we've really built it to integrate with your life to make it easy to use.
Nice. And no, that's really exciting. Actually, it sounds like something out of the future, if
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
Aaron. And I can't help but ask myself, is that like, when people get on that, like the feedback that you've gotten from your users, has it been hugely positive? Like, how long lasting is this? Will it work? Is it something that people have to use for the rest of their life, or they'll just use it during those hard moments of their lives? And how long do we expect the results to stay, in comparison to, traditional, like, ways of treating
Yeah.
depression, like such as antidepressants that you guys are trying to avoid?
Yeah. So if you look at antidepressants, and this was shocking to me coming into sort of the medical field, antidepressants work for about 25% of the people who use them, so less than a third, and more than 60% have side effects, which was extraordinary to me that we sort of accept that as status quo or sort of the best we can do. And we ran a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial about 2 years ago now that showed that flow was over twice as effective as leading antidepressants, none of the drug side effects. And that was true as a standalone treatment. So over 50% of users were in remission at 12 weeks. And then 67% when you combined it with drugs. So folks that were already on drugs. We also have over 45,000 real world users across the UK and the EU. Over 70% of those users will see results in 3 weeks. Um, and if you don't see results, we obviously have a 30-day money back guarantee. So, I
Wow,
think
that's, that's
it's
amazing.
incredible, right? I know I don't want to say it's surprising to me every day, but it's certainly rewarding every day. As you can imagine, our users are very diverse. There's a large percentage, they've tried everything, right? They've tried inpatient drugs, nothing works. They come to us as a last resort. Seems too good to be true. But it isn't, and I would encourage, people to review our trust pilot results. Same thing with the NHS, right? I think everyone's like, well, if it works, it's incredible, but how can it work?
Yeah,
Now, in terms of usage, it sort of depends on the user. For about 50% of people, depression is a chronic illness, which means it will be recurrent. So for those folks, they often will stay in the maintenance phase for, a year onwards. For others, for whom it may be situational, seasonal, they use the device, they treat sort of the onset. They may maintain for a couple months, then they put the device aside and they keep it in home in case something else happens. So it sort of really depends on a user's history, but we make it easy to personalize.
nice, nice, and no, that's really exciting to hear. And I
Yeah,
think the 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 hardest thing most of the time with people is that you want something that doesn't make you feel like, as I said earlier, like your head is in the clouds.
exactly.
And I think some people sometimes kind of struggle with that when it comes to antidepressants. And then they have to find the right dosage and everything like that. So it's like a bit of trial and error before they get to the right dosage or the right form of antidepressants. And sometimes other people try even changing like like school philosophy, like and by that I mean is like the philosophy of life that they try
Yeah,
to look in life. So other people try to adopt stoicism, and these are just one of the tactics that I've
yeah,
seen around my own colleagues, and it's quite exciting to now sort of like have this device. And obviously, I think the question in people's minds right now would be, in terms of market approval, in terms of like regulatory like front of things. What would you guys say? Were you guys have you been approved, or were you guys basically available for people to purchase this? For people
yeah.
listening. Mm.
We are approved. We have been in market in the EU and the UK for about 4.5, 5 years now. We are a class 2A medical device, so we do have quite significant regulation, which we welcome, right? Most of the time we welcome it. Sort of gift and a curse. But it was important for us. That requires obviously clinical data, clinical safety, clinical efficacy, and I think that is a differentiator. We've been pursuing FDA approval in the US, quite tricky under the current administration. Uh, that's sort of ongoing. That's been ongoing for the last year and a half. We'll see how that goes. We are pursuing an over the counter option in the US, very similar to what we have in Europe, where we're fortunate enough to sell both over the counter, but also via over 500 clinics and then via our NHS partnerships. So, multiple different ways that users can access Flow today.
Nice, nice. That's really exciting, really, to be honest. And one thing, whenever I hear a company having a sort of like different strategy for the US, and I think it
Yeah.
was really nice to like also like educate the listeners and the audience on why that is important, because the way the markets between, or the space between the manufacturer and the end user, the patients in the US is structured differently than in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
So you tend to have a lot more people in between the manufacturer and the patient in the US. So people tend to adopt different sort of like strategies on how to enter the US markets. But my question is then, does it mean your pricing it remains the same in the EU and the US, or you're going to have different sort of like pricings for different markets? And maybe you could tell us more on that.
We really genuinely try to be as consistent as possible. Our goal, as I mentioned, is accessibility and affordability. And I think on face, some people may say, well, it seems expensive. Well, it's actually very valuable for a product that works, right? It's actually quite cheap in some ways. And that's ironically the feedback we get in the US seems too cheap if it works. And so we do try, again, we do try and keep costs consistent. I say what drives difference. We do cost like a little bit more in Switzerland. If you look for us in Brazil, we're going to be a lot more there. And in the US, we are a little bit more expensive. Unfortunately, that's due to tariffs, imports. Those are all add on costs. So we aren't marking it up. We are sort of beholden to the same Trump tariffs as everyone else. And different countries have different rules. So unfortunately, so we try and eat as much of that as we can. We're a very small business, but that is driving the primary difference. But if we could, we would have the same price everywhere.
No, thank you for adding that. I think
Yeah.
because I think it's one question that tends to come like around a lot, and people sometimes don't really understand what goes into this, and so it's quite nice for you to explain on that. And
Yeah.
I think obviously now I'm kind of curious in terms of like what has your biggest hurdles been in terms of like when you guys hit the markets, approach the markets, or even like are you having to teach people new products like or like about how it works, and are you having to go against what's like the conventional belief of like, okay, I'm not feeling so happy, so let me quickly look for a pill. But now you guys are coming and say, wait a second, before you go for a pill, then we also have a medical device, like an actual product that you can use, um or like convincing doctors. Like, I mean, like you can tell us in terms of what
Yeah.
your biggest hurdles have been in this journey.
Our hurdles, I think, have been much different than what I expected going into it. I thought we were going to have to spend more time convincing people, clinicians, patients, on the limitations of drugs. That was not our experience. So when we came to market, actually, clinicians are like, we know how bad drugs are, or they don't, if they work for someone, great, but they don't work for most folks. We got to spend a lot of time trying to optimize the dosage. If they're on other drugs, they have other conditions, there's drug interactions, side effects. But the number one question is, does it work? Right. And so I think the first couple years, we really invested heavily, disproportionately for a company of our size, in those clinical trials and building clinical evidence. Also having, I think, the experience of those tens of thousands of real world users has been very helpful. And then the NHS found us. I think, of course, once you sort of surpass the clinical evidence hurdle, there's a question: will people use it? Adherence on drugs is very low. Uh, it's very easy to take a pill. So I think the question is, will people wear a headset? Will they? Fair enough, fair enough. And I think what we say is our adherence, is over 80%, 90% of folks who were offered flow chose it over a drug. There's no side effects, right? Which is a big reason why people don't take pills. And so I think there was definitely some challenges around perception, much less than I expected from patients and clinicians. I would say fundamentally, our biggest issue is regulators. They don't know what to do with us because we don't look like a traditional medical device, right? If you think about your traditional TMS machine, it's in clinic, it's very clinical. I can only access it through a doctor, and then here we come, right, over the counter, safe enough to be at home. Like what a breakthrough. You think they'd welcome it? Nope, not quite. And so we've really gone on this journey. What is it? First, people ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they accept you. I think we've gone on that, right? So people mostly, I think, sort of dismissed us out of hand, regulators. Then they're like, well, there's no way this works. What a joke. Let me dig in. And then the point at which they're like, oh, this does work. I think our fight now is, well, if it does work, people shouldn't be allowed to buy it over the counter. It must go through a clinician, and we really fight that because for some people that sort of removes access. So it's not, we've never had to prove that it works. We've had to convince people to take a chance on the channels that we're pursuing. And that has been honestly way worse than I expected. So, yeah, the regulators have a lot of power. Yeah.
Well, that's really it's not the first time I've heard that. And I think even when I worked in R&D on some of the latest new technologies, you'd find that sometimes when you file in your papers to the regulators and they're seeing the technology for the first time, for most of them it was the first time they developed the idea. So then they're thinking, okay, wait a second, this is the first time we're hearing about this. Okay, it looks cool, it looks great, it works. Well, they're saying that it works with depression. That's what they'll be thinking. And then they try to understand this. Even when they come for audits, sometimes it's like you also have to then educate them about what the product actually is, and then you
Yes.
hope that they have an expert, in their departments, and they try to hire as many experts as possible that will understand, the technology, on the sort of like the wavelength, like sort of like level, so like the physics behind it essentially. And then that takes some time, and then you have to do fairly more papers, do more clinical trials. But I'm really I'm not really surprised to hear that. But if anything, it makes me laugh to hear that it's like a common problem that is kind of also come through. But do you think now, as the years pass, sort of like the as it becomes more like accepted, like in terms of like in the market by people, by consumers, do you think it's getting less? And why do you think there may be an incentive besides them trying to push it for it to be something prescribed by doctors? What do you think is what's the gain for it, and why are you guys fighting against it? Do you want to maintain it as easily accessible, or do you have other reasons perhaps that are motivating you to keep it as easily accessible as possible to every single person who needs it?
Um, So, I mean, our goal again is accessibility. And so for some people, they are either privileged or fortunate enough to be able to buy it outright and use the device, right? And again, I think our point is for most people, we are not a first stop, right? They have tried other things. They are under the guidance of a clinician. They understand their illness and they're looking for solutions. Why would we remove that access when the regulator has with a fine tooth comb, reviewed the device, the safety profile? It is safe enough for home use, right? That's where it
Yeah,
belongs. Now, for others, particularly when reimbursement is helpful in driving accessibility, it should be through a clinician. I think our challenge with the regulators, and again, it's hard to paint them with a broad brush. I think we've been fortunate to work with some very innovative and forward thinking regulators. But fundamentally, today, regulation protects the incumbents and incentives are not aligned. They're
true.
incentivized not to make difficult decisions. They're incentivized to avoid risk at all costs. And there's no incentive to evaluate the risk of a new technology versus the risk of people not having access to that. And so, if you give them the benefit of the doubt, even sort of the most well-intentioned regulator in the world, no one wants to make a tough decision right now. It's easier just to say no and go with the status quo, unless we change the incentives and we're more forward and more aggressive on innovation. And I know there's some initiatives within the EU where they want to be more welcoming, but I think the challenge right now is we've pursued the regulated path because we believe in the technology. We think it's important. We want to be on even ground with pharma and drugs, but they really don't make it easy. And so I think that's why you see so many new devices find loopholes, right? They find ways to get to market that maybe are quote unquote illegal because it's so overwhelming for a young company or a little company to actually do things correctly. And so I think they need to course correct a bit on that. And if they do that, I think there's probably a happy medium,
Nice, nice.
but it's
That's
diplomatic.
really exciting to hear, Erin. That's really exciting to hear, and I do agree with you. And I think I spoke to one sort of like MedTech startup expert a few months ago, and one thing he was telling people was that if you're gonna try to get to markets, just try to tick the bare minimum ticks as possible you need to get to market because of how like integrates the you know it's like a tangle of like webs like that you have to navigate and everything. But no, thank you for that. And I
Yeah.
think the next thing that I'm going to ask you is, because obviously what you said right now, like, it's quite mind-boggling really, because it's really sounds something that's science fiction for most people listening to this. But actually, this is the reality. This is the product you guys really have in your hands and it's on the market. So then the question becomes, okay, if this is what's the current state where we are, like as a human species in terms of our technology, like, what do you think the current versus the future states of, like medtech will be when it comes to treating depression, for example? And again, with this question, feel free to go as science fiction as you want. It's really open ended. It's
Yeah.
it's become like a traditional question on the podcast, because most technologies that come on the podcast is things people don't think of off the top of their head, but it's actually something that exists. So yeah.
Okay. I would say, I think we're going to look back. I think when we look at the speed of development, right? I think there's two schools of thought when we look at sort of AI and tech. And I think there's this group that's sort of like, uh-oh, we're all going to have chips in our brain and we're all going to be sort of androids and we're going to lose what it means to be human, right? We're going to we're going to lose all of our jobs to AI, etc. And I think, to be honest, for a while there was a part of me that was maybe in that school, or maybe more in that school. And I think I think actually, as as we learn more about AI and sort of the reality, I think we have an opportunity to actually leverage technology to unlock more about what makes us human. And so I'll sort of qualify what I mean by that. Because of the advances in AI, because of the advances in technology, we have the opportunity to put a device in home for $500 or less when that same device would have cost $20,000 before. I think you can do the math on, if at scale, can we continue to bring that cost down? We also have made incredible progress on personalization and prediction using even basic technology like EEG. Today treatment really is one size fits all, right? They give you a drug. If it doesn't work, you're told you're treatment resistant to depression, not that the drug doesn't work for you. And I honestly think we're going to look back in 20 years and be like, I can't believe we were okay with this. We all got the exact same dosage, we all got the exact same treatment, and that was the best we can do. And so I do think we'll see highly personalized medicine. For some people that will mean stimulations, for others it's stimulation and drugs, for others it may be something else entirely, right? I think there's some innovative things in light, exercise, and I think right now you're not able to really explore sort of these holistic treatments, and technology advancements maybe will give clinicians space to actually build a personalized protocol. That's a big focus for us. We want to meet people where they are. We want people to build a custom protocol with a clinician that works for them, with solutions that work for them. Like, depression is a very multifaceted illness. It affects people in different ways. It can be driven by physical factors, physiological, psychological, and we really are just scratching the surface of what is possible. And while drugs can be life saving, oh my God, I don't want anyone to walk away and think I'm anti drug. They are really a blunt instrument. And I think the
Yeah.
precision we can get with devices is so powerful. Our challenge will be to continue to make sure they're accessible, because every part of the process leads to increasing costs. So I think that's our challenge, but I think it's a very exciting time.
Well, nice. That's really good, and like a huge part of the reason why I'm really happy to bring you on this podcast to discuss this is, well, I think most people like refer to like my generation as like a snowflake generation. So
Okay.
everyone has some sort of
Yeah.
like depression of some sort, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just us or the fact that maybe it's just more clinically diagnosed better these days. But I don't think anyone who went through the Second World War had it much easier. But yeah, I mean, so this is something that's gonna be really good to help people. If anything, it's an added option to whatever they might have tried, and I would recommend anyone listening to the podcast to I mean, if they know anyone who could use this, to just suggest it to their friends. And but one more thing before I let you go, Aaron,
Yeah.
is that I know you mentioned that it's this like, well, okay, with Pews, like it's sort of like a trial and error, because you have to find the right dosage for each person and sort of like try to balance the right brain chemistry, right? But with you guys working on brain stimulation, really, using waves essentially, or like electrical
Hmm.
stimulation, how, like, just to reassure people, like how do they know that wavelength or stimulation methods that you guys are doing are basically applicable for all brains, and not just particular kind of brains? Or if, like, yeah.
Yeah. So what I will say is we absolutely do not work for everyone. What we do see is over 80, or yeah, I think the most recent number is about 80% of people who use the device for 3 weeks do see a clinically significant effect. And so our current device in market uses a standard protocol that's been tested again with over 50,000 people, clinical trials. We are audited regularly, so you can be assured that it's safe. If it doesn't work for you, we offer a 30-day money back guarantee. We're very excited about our next generation device, which we hope to have in the next couple quarters, which is fully personalized, offers some predictive capabilities. We'll be able to tell you whether or not the treatment will work for you, and then customize it for your individual brainwaves. So again, the future really is here. It's here today. But if you're suffering, I would say you have absolutely nothing to lose.
Of course.
So give us a try.
And well, for when you release the other one, I'm happy to bring you back on the
Oh,
podcast to
great.
discuss a bit
Okay.
about it. because I think that would be really exciting. And
Yeah.
yeah, but no, thank you very much, Erin. And one more thing, if people want to reach out to you, like, do they reach out to you straight to your company website, or do they reach out to you on LinkedIn, etc.? Where can people get hold of
Yeah,
you?
you can reach me at Erin at flowneuroscience.com. I'm always happy to answer any questions. That is my email. I answer it directly. I do not have a team that does it. It's just me. So it may take me a day to get to you, but I will get back to you.
All right, cool. Now, anyways, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Erin, and I wish you guys the best with the
Thanks so much.
new next gen device coming out soon.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here.